I never had the classic definition of home growing up. I never had a white picket fence or a two-car garage. I grew up in a glass studio. This was my living room. You can imagine what it was like running around here as a toddler. I was eating glass like normal kids would eat dirt. It was just part of my upbringing. This place was located in Project 1, the first artist commune south of Market in San Francisco in the 1970s. It was a bizarre place, full of wild stories, crazy people, and amazing personalities. One of it, his name was actually Dick. He lived across the hallway from us. I used to ride my bike in the hallway, and one day Dick came home and he had lipstick on. I thought, I was about 6 years old. 4 or 5 months later, Dick came home and Dick was wearing a miniskirt. I thought, well, I'm 6, what do I know? Wild place. 4 or 5 months later, Dick walks down the hall and I just stood there and looked. Dick had tits. That needed some explaining. So I run in and I see my father. I say, Daddy, 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 why does Dick have tits? And he knew this was coming, and he smiled and sat down beside me and said, Orfeo, it takes balls to get tits. So Dick was just expressing himself. So I thought on that and I said, so how am I going to express myself? I didn't do anything as drastic as Dick, but I made myself a little glass window. And I lived in this glass studio until I finished high school. This is me when I was 15 years old, when I completed one part of a big window that my dad made. It gave me a sense of accomplishment that I'd actually put something, I'd cut glass and bled glass my whole life. I was always around it. It was amazing. So the next slide is not actually a picture of Dick in drag. This is my dad with Dale Chihuly. Dale Chihuly was the glass blower. My dad was the stained glass artist. They created the studio glass movement in the 70s and 80s in the United States. This photo was taken at Pilchuck, which was another wild and crazy place that I spent a lot of time at and had a lot of crazy experiences at. I learned a lot at Pilchuck. I started going there as a kid when I was 4, 5, 6 as a son. Then I went back when I was 15 as a student, 16 as a TA. Then I translated for Italians and mopped up after the place was closed. I did whatever I could to spend as much time there as possible. Now, I learned about glass blowing, glass casting, glass fusing, lamp working, and all the different techniques that weren't available to me growing up in the glass studio. There it was just flat glass. The other crazy thing about Pilchuck are glass personalities. Even amongst all the crafties, all the people that make and produce craft, glass artists are the most insane. It is just common knowledge. When I graduated from high school and moved on to college, I decided that I had to get as far away from the glass shadow that my father created as possible. It was vast. It was overbearing. It was amazing. But sometimes you just need to do what you got to do. So I studied industrial design at the California College of Arts and Crafts. I wanted to learn about all the other materials, processes. I worked with ceramics and learned how to draw and use computers, took silver classes, and did everything that I could not to do glass. Of course, glass came back and bit me in the ass. When I was in the end of college, I started designing and producing for a glass company in Mexico City called Nouvelle Crystal. It was an amazing experience. Again, I designed a pretty successful line of products. And when I graduated college, I got as far away from everything as I could. A year later, the phone rang. It was my dad saying, we've got an opportunity to move to Mexico City and start a glass factory. Using the techniques that we've used since you were young and the knowledge that you've earned in design school. I was living in Bali at that time. Surfing, building a hotel with friends. I really didn't want to come back. I thought that might have been it. But I thought about it. I thought, can I give something back to glass? Can I do something new? Can I innovate? Do I have it in me to be somebody different, to do something that's not just a paperweight on somebody's desk? I decided that I'd give it a shot and that I could do it. And I moved to Mexico City. Now, glass There's a lot of ways you can reference glass. One of those is cooking. This is my glass studio in Mexico City. This is cutting strips of glass and putting it into the oven. Glass blowing is a lot like honey on the end of a stick. Glass casting is a lot like filling a mold with Jell-O. And glass fusing is essentially like baking. There's a huge conventional oven in front of you. So you put the glass in there and you push it into the oven. And sometimes you know what's going to come out and it's a production piece. And sometimes you can't wait to see what's going to come out. It's really an emotional experience because you want to see what those 3 degrees did that you were changing in the temperature. I've tortured glass, and glass has tortured me. I've boiled glass and done about everything I can to the material, and the material has done everything to me. I've made glass plywood. Oops, we need to switch the slides. Go one more. No, down, one more, there you go. I've made glass plywood, which is essentially taking sheets of glass and putting them in the oven and fusing them together, and you get this big block of layered glass. And then we drill out core samples out of that glass and polish the edges. And then we glue a top on them, they become glasses. They also become other pieces. Now, glass has a mind of its own sometimes. Let's go back. The slides got switched. Go back to, yeah, there you go. There you go. Glass has a mind of its own sometimes. This is just a total coincidence. This is by taking the Swiss cheese that is a block of glass plywood once you've drilled it out and letting the glass collapse on itself. And so glass can be very sensual in and of itself without you putting any hand to it. Glass can be a huge dome that's 870 square meters, which we saw earlier, which was a piece my dad did in Kaohsiung, Taiwan, that we did about 10% of it in my shop in Mexico City. But glass can also be tiny. It can be, go one more. Glass can also be tiny. It can be tiny little pieces of jewelry that every little millimeter makes a difference. Every tiny little detail that you polish has to be perfect because it's something that's very personal to someone. Sometimes I go on a trip. Mushrooms are a good trip. I've ate a lot of glass mushrooms. I had a show at Barney's on Madison Avenue with all my mushrooms with Missoni, and it's about combining techniques. There's hand-blown pieces and slump pieces. This is a project that I did with Swarovski crystal, which was 5 martini shakers for the launching of the movie Sex and the City 2 in Mexico. So I was introduced to Swarovski and started doing a lot of different things with it. They started giving me the material, and for me, Swarovskis, before I started using them, were this glimmering thing that fashion designers would use when somebody walks down the runway. But when I had a big pile of them in front of me, I thought it's just the same thing that I make, but I don't have to make it. It's already made for me. So I started grinding it and gluing it and fusing it and doing all these other things that nobody ever thought of doing with it because they're really expensive. So these are glass crystal tubes that I hand blow, and then we fill them with Swarovski crystals. So I found the way that I am when I work with glass actually affects the way that glass comes out. When I'm caring, attentive, and focused, you can see that in the work. When I'm anxious, distracted, and angry, you can also see that in the work. I've developed a very personal relationship with glass over a long period of time. I haven't been faithful to much in my life, but I've been faithful to it.